Before I do start this video, make sure to use my TCG player affiliate down below if you're looking for any of these singles that I talk about today. Also, this channel is sponsored by Arcane Fortress. If you're looking for the best deck boxes around, make sure to use my link down below in the description to check them out. One other way you can support the channel is by becoming a patron. There are some great benefits of being a patron to the channel, such as giveaways, deck advice, and more when you do join. Hey, what's going on YouTube? This is Devin coming back at you with another video today on PubStomp MTG, and in this video today, I will be going over Akul the Unrepentant. This is a pretty sweet commander being a Scorpion Dragon Rogue. The combination of the typing is superb, honestly, and I'm super excited to talk about it, so let's first read what it does. So for double black and double red, it's a legendary creature, Scorpion Dragon Rogue, being a 5/5 body. It does have flying and trample. You sacrifice 3 other creatures. You may put a creature card from your hand onto the battlefield, activate only as a sorcery and only once each turn. So there's a lot to unpack on that commander specifically. Honestly, there's a lot of cool things that you can do to basically cheat out big creatures, but it is at a cost. It almost in a way feels like Yu-Gi-Oh, where you have to sacrifice like 3 summon creatures to put a bigger creature on the battlefield. Of course, the one downside to this commander though is you only activate this as a sorcery speed ability and only once each turn, so it is pretty limiting on that aspect. But if you just sacrifice 3 creatures to put like a big Eldrazi on the battlefield, you're most likely going to be winning throughout the game. In a weird way, this does remind me of Rakdos Lord of Riots, the one that's like double red and double black. That version does have a way to basically cheat out big giant scary threats depending on how much life your opponent's lost. And of course, in a similar way, this does cheat out big giant scary threats, but of course, instead of life loss, you're focusing on sacrificing creatures, which can be pretty abusable, especially if you go in a go wide strategy. And so that's what I'll be talking about today. Of course, there'll be a lot of big beefy threats that you can cheat into play, and so let's get right into it. So let's first focus on the little guys, ones that we could sacrifice to put big creatures on the battlefield. I do like Gleeful Demolition, very underrated in my opinion. Whether you want to destroy an artifact on the opponent's side of the battlefield or destroy one of our own so that we could get 3 goblins on the battlefield so that we could sacrifice a cheat into big threat. Another great option is Young Pyromancer. We do have a decent amount of spells that we can use to make sure that we get a lot of benefit out of making more elemental creature tokens with Young Pyromancer. Another great option in my opinion is Lagomos Hand of Hatred. This acts as a tutor. Also on top of that, you can just make a token at the beginning of your combat. I feel like it's going to be very easy to get to 5 sacrificed creatures in your turn, especially when 3 of them are going to be sacrificed with your commander's ability. So that way we could just tap Lagomos and then search for our card and put it into our hand. Of course, you can repeatedly get some tokens on the battlefield by using cards like Chandra, Acolyte of Flame. I mainly like it for that 0 ability, creating 2 elemental creature tokens. Of course, they are going to be sacrificed at the beginning of the next end step, but that's completely okay, especially if we do have our commander. We just need 1 more creature to make sure we can cheat in a big giant threat. An absolute slam dunk of a value engine is Liliana Dreadhorde General, mainly because of that static ability. Whenever a creature you control dies, you draw a card. Of course, we can make a creature token on the battlefield with its +1, or we can -4 to make each player sacrifice 2 creatures. But really, we like it for that static ability of drawing cards and making a token so that we could sacrifice it with our commander. So either way, it's great value, but a really good value piece is Tevezdat Zumafools. This is possibly one of my more favorite partner commanders that is out there, mainly because all of its abilities are fantastic. Especially with that first one, we're going to be using that a lot with our commander. Create 2/0/1 Black Thrall creature tokens. Of course, we just need 1 more to sacrifice, but that's going to be very easy, especially the longer we do have Tevesh on the battlefield. We could just constantly make thralls and cheat out more threats. Plus, if you are in a pinch and you need some extra card draw, you can use that +1 ability to sacrifice a creature. If it was legendary, you could draw 3 cards, but if it wasn't, you could just draw 2 cards. Either way, it's very good. Of course, you will need some extra sacrifice payoffs because of course it's one thing to sacrifice creatures, but why not get some extra bonuses of it? I did want to include some of the Kamigawa dragons like Atsushi the Blazing Sky and Junji the Midnight Sky. I do like these options because you could either cheat them into play with our commander, or you could use them as sacrifice fodder so that you could get additional value like Atsushi getting some card draw but playing from exile technically, or you could create 3 treasure tokens to ramp ahead a little bit. And with Junji, you could sacrifice him to make each opponent discard 2 cards and lose 2 life, or reanimate a non-dragon onto the battlefield. Of course, you are going to lose life, but that's not a big downside, especially if you get a big threat. Since there is a sacrifice theme, of course you got to include Blood Artist, Zulaport Cutthroat, and Mayhem Devil. These are all stars in any sacrifice deck, whether you want to gain some life with Blood Artist and Zulaport Cutthroat, or if you want to deal damage to any target with Mayhem Devil whenever any player sacrifices a permanent. All of these are perfect options, especially because you're going to be sacrificing 3 creatures at a time at most with your commander. Of course, if you are sacrificing cards to get a big giant scary threat on the battlefield, why not get Vein Ripper? Of course, this is a Sorin Pioneer combo, but at home with Vein Ripper. But this is basically just a roided out version of Blood Artist. Whenever a creature dies, target opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. Plus, it does have ward sacrifice a creature, and it does have a 6/5 body. I will say what I do like about that ward ability is the fact that if somebody does cast a destroy spell on Vein Ripper, they will have to pay that ward cost before a Vein Ripper does leave the battlefield to sacrifice a creature. And of course, when they do sacrifice a creature, they will lose 2 life and you gain 2 life. I mean, you can target to anybody, but of course you're going to target to that person that destroyed Vein Ripper. Of course, you can be extra mean and extra dirty by using Grave Pact and also Dictate of Erebos. Of course, these are very unforgivable to a lot of different people. Not a lot of people like playing against these effects, but we're playing Akul, the Unrepentant. This guy means some serious business, and you definitely don't want to mess around with him. Before I do talk about the big scary threats, I do want to focus on haste enablers because, of course, when we do sacrifice those creatures, we just cheat it into play. So why not use a card like Rising of the Day, where creatures you control have haste and legendary creatures you control get +1/+0. Hammer of Perforos does act as a great haste enabler, but most importantly, it does make tokens for us to sacrifice later on, especially if we have a lot of lands on the battlefield. And of course, one of my personal favorites, an OG of mine, Urabrask the Hidden. I love Urabrask so much as a Praetor itself. Creatures you control have haste, but most importantly, creatures your opponents control enter the battlefield tapped so that we can swing uncontested most of the time, especially if they play a big scary threat. It'll just enter the battlefield tapped. So what kind of big boys do we want to bring to the table? There's a lot of great options. I did want to focus on a dragon theme, mainly because our commander is a dragon itself, and a lot of dragons do have great ETBs. Cavern Horde Dragon and Nullspy Dragon are great options, mainly because Cavern Horde Dragon acts as a treasure generator, depending on how much artifacts one of our opponents do have. And depending on how much damage we do to our opponents, Nullspy Dragon could be excellent, getting us the card advantage we need in Rakdos colors. Following that, I do want to talk about some other dragons that desperately need a reprint, and that's Ancient Copper Dragon and Ancient Brass Dragon. So either you can get a lot of treasure tokens with Ancient Copper Dragon. Of course, you can roll a dud and get like a 1 and only get 1 treasure token when you deal combat damage. And with Ancient Brass Dragon can be a great reanimation card. Of course, the more you do roll, the higher chance you will put more creatures on the battlefield. And if we are sacrificing a lot of creatures on the battlefield, we could just resurrect them later on with Ancient Brass Dragon. Of course, we do have another oldie but a goodie with Bogarden Hellkite. This basically enters the battlefield. It deals 5 damage divided as you choose among any number of targets. This does cost 8 mana, that's a lot, but it does have flash and flying, being a 5/5 body. I do mainly like it for that removal aspect that it can take advantage of. Staying on the train with dragons, I did want to focus on Blast Furnace Hellkite. This does cost a lot of mana, but it does have that artifact offering. It does have flying and double strike itself, and creatures attacking your opponents have double strike. So the reason why I do like this is the fact that a lot of people may be incentivized to attack their opponents because all their creatures will get double strike when they do attack them. Plus, it will give all our creatures double strike when we do attack our opponents, and most likely we do have a lot of flyers where we could swing uncontested. But let's take a break from dragons and let's talk about Eldrazi. Of course, we could cheat in some big fat Eldrazi like It That Betrays. Of course, you can kind of add any kind of Eldrazi you want in this list to cheat into play. I didn't focus on that too much in this deck, at least, mainly because I wanted to go with the theme of dragons more, but It That Betrays does synergize with a lot of our deck. We do have a lot of those I sacrifice cards, then our opponents sacrifice cards, and of course when they do sacrifice them, It That Betrays will put those cards onto our battlefield. So that's more of the reason why I do have specifically It That Betrays and not other Eldrazi. But let's go back to dragons. Let's talk about Terror of the Peaks and Warstorm Surge, basically the same kind of effect. Terror of the Peaks is a creature effect, but Warstorm Surge is an enchantment effect. The big reason why I do like these effects in this specific deck is because we are cheating big threats on the battlefield, so of course we could just blast anything into the face. So of course with all those sacrifice effects, with Blood Artist, we're going to be draining our opponents a lot. We're also going to be blasting them in the face with these two effects. Yeah, our opponents are not going to stand a chance with us as we get going with our game plan. However, that's going to do it for me, guys. Thank you guys so much for coming by and watching this video on Akul the Unrepentant. This is a very cool commander, and honestly, the reason why I wanted to make this deck tech is because it absolutely has some very cool art. Normally, when I do think of dragons, I think of big, giant reptile monsters, but in this case, they're scorpions, which is a very neat take, especially being in a desert theme with Outlaws of Thunder Junction. But let me know down below in the comments, what are your thoughts about Akul? Do you plan on building him? I would love to hear your thoughts down below. Also, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. With that out of the way, thank you for stopping by.